Hello, my name is Tejas Pandya, and I'm a master's student in the philosophy department at Dalhousie University. My paper, Knowledge of Racism, the Best Conceptual Framework, was awarded the 2022 Irving and Jeanne Glovin Award. I would like to start by thanking the selection committee for the time you spent evaluating my essay and the other essays submitted. I'm sure it was no easy task, and I thank you for all the hard work you put in. I would also like to thank the Oscar Schindler Humanities Foundation and the family members of Irving and Jeanne Glovin. Thank you also to Dr. George Mencher, the nephew of Irving Glovin. Your generous funding is much appreciated, and I sincerely thank you. Now I will get into explaining my paper, Knowledge of Racism, the Best Conceptual Framework. So oftentimes, when minorities make claims about experienced racism, there is a challenge posed. But how do you know it was racism? So in my paper, what I do is I unpack this claim. And I start doing this by looking at general knowledge frameworks. So there are two main knowledge frameworks that I go through: the Cartesian framework and the Austinian framework. So under the Cartesian framework, knowledge requires absolute certainty. You need to be 100% certain about something in order to make a knowledge claim. Under the Austinian framework, making a knowledge claim is more like making a promise, or it's more like staking your credibility on something. So in the paper, what I do is I argue that implicitly, when people make the challenge, but how do you know it was racism? Oftentimes, we are wrongly operating under the Cartesian framework. So when operating under the Cartesian framework, it becomes impossible to state, I know I experienced racism, because the standard becomes too high. The standard for knowledge, if you're operating under the Cartesian framework, is 100% certainty. So let's say, for example, that someone called me curry face. And now I go and tell another person about this experience. And I say, I know I experienced racism. Well, the person that I'm talking to, if we're operating under the Cartesian framework, could say, well, how do you know you experienced racism? And then I could say, I was called this thing that, it seems to be racist, or, racially tinged, something like that. And then they could make the challenge along the following lines. Well, you can't really say you experienced racism, because maybe they were joking or something like that. And then if we're operating on the Cartesian framework, I'll say, I guess that's true. I can only say it's very likely, but I can't say I know. Or let's take kind of an even stronger claim. Let's say a black person is called the N-word, and then they tell another person about this experience. And the black person says, I know I experienced racism. Well, the person challenging could say, how do you know you experienced racism? Because, you can't really get inside the other person's head and know whether they were intending to be racist. And then the black person would have to say, I guess that's true, so I can only really say it's very likely that I experienced racism, but I can't say I know I experienced racism. However, under the Austinian framework, minorities can make this knowledge claim about experienced racism, because making the knowledge claim is more like staking your credibility on something or making a promise. And in most other facets of life, this is the knowledge framework that we operate under. So for example, let's say I got my car stolen and I told someone about this. It would be very weird if the person I was telling about this would be like, how do you know you got your car stolen? They would kind of just take me at my word that my car got stolen, because I'm staking my credibility on something, or I'm making a promise about this claim. So what I do in my paper is I'm arguing that we should take the Austinian framework and apply that to claims about experienced racism. And I argue that this will have better ethical implications and better political implications for society. Thank you.